And MP for Hinckley and Bosworth, who's a former GP. To my right, Edward Addu, another debutant, broadcaster, who's the host of the podcast Across the Pond. And next to him, Dan Hodges, columnist for the Mail on Sunday, who is so far, I think, podcast-less. But I'm sure that will change over time. It'll be snapped up by somebody soon. The number to call, as ever, 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number or text 84850. And as I say, do watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross question with Ian Dale. This is LBC.
And just a reminder, if you ever miss an episode of Cross Question, then it's Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, and the episode is always uploaded to the Cross Question podcast within an hour of the programme finishing. I know lots of people seem to listen to it while they're walking their dogs the next morning. So I am told anyway. Right, let's go to our first caller. It's Jeff in Merthyr Tydfil. Hello, Jeff.
How are you doing, Ian? How things, right? All right? Good. I'd like to ask the panel, simply, is this the best time to confront Trump, Putin? Because obviously, or as far as I can tell, Russia's on its knees, and if you don't confront him now, you're going to have to do it sometime in the near future, because this is a crisis and you have to do it. What does the panel think?
Okay, Luke.
I think it's good time, isn't it, to see where things are going. It's interesting, a 90-minute call. What comes out of the 90-minute call, we're still finding that out. I think Russia is probably under pressure, but we know Ukraine is as well. Trump, since it's coming whether you like it or not, has at least forced it into discussion of peace. If we had this conversation before Christmas, would we be looking at a discussion of peace or a ceasefire based? No. So something has moved, but I think at some point you have to show some strength, because we know from Russia's previous history when it's taken and annexed various different parts of different countries. I think at some point we're going to have to stand up and make that stand. The question is who's going to be able to do that.
Well, we're not going to ceasefire now, are we? Given what we know happened in this phone call. All Putin said is that he won't get energy targets in the next 30 days. I mean, that is not a ceasefire under the definition of a ceasefire that we know.
No, but at least it's something moving forward. I'm an optimist, and I'm hoping that there is at least a dialogue happening that may see something move forward. But you're absolutely right. So you have to, Reagan said, trust and verify, didn't he? So we have to see what that actually looks like, whether that will even hold. The problem is if Putin doesn't feel that, and he's moving, at what point, as Paul said, do we have to make a stand? Trump's usually quite erratic when he says this, or so we've seen that. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like, but I don't know.
Shouldn't we stop giving Trump the benefit of the doubt? Because he's clearly taking sides here. Every criticism that he makes of Ukraine and Zelensky, not once, that I can recall, has he ever criticised Russia for being the aggressor in this war.
It's almost a question, sorry.
Well, shouldn't we stop giving him the benefit of the doubt in terms of his motives? He says he wants peace. Most of us translate that to mean capitulation by Ukraine.
Well, I hope not, and that's why our job as allies is to try and make sure that that message is heard. He is in the driving seat, unfortunately. America is the most powerful country on this planet. He is making those cases, so we should call it out. And I think the reaction after what happened in the Olympics, I think you saw was very much called out to say that's not the way you treat your allies. Let's see. I hope there's method to the madness, but I don't know.
It's a tactic that he's using to make sure that Putin doesn't do anything, doesn't take aggressive action. He's trying to ease the situation by not sort of, be a bit gung-ho and say, well, look, you've got to do this or else we're going to retaliate. Because sometimes if you're dealing certainly with aggressors or people who step out of line, says it's the best thing to try and do it in a diplomatic way. And I suppose he's doing that in order to keep the peace.
Well, I mean, Trump, you're giving Trump the benefit of the doubt as well.
Listen, I'm not here to say that he is the saviour, but I think in this aspect, in order to keep peace and to make sure that there's no further escalation, what else can be done?
Can you think of any single example in history where that strategy has worked, where you effectively appease a dictator and you get long-term peace? Because I can't think of it.
No, you're right. But I think in this aspect, we certainly don't want the war to escalate for everybody to get involved. I mean, if that happens, that would be catastrophic.
But who else would be getting involved?
I'm saying, I've had conversations with friends who say, listen, if it's not dealt with in an appropriate way, what Trump said to Zelensky, that awful the press conference, it could be World War III. We don't want that.
No, we don't want that. But we can't sort of let those thoughts govern appeasing Putin, surely, because if he's allowed to claim victory in Ukraine, surely the natural thing for him then to do is to invade somewhere else and claim victory. We know he wants to recreate the borders of the Soviet Union. It's entirely possible that he could go to Moldova or Estonia or any number of other countries next. And if that happens, I think all the people who are sort of bleating about peace now will end up with this being.
But the only person who can keep him on the leash is Trump.
Yes, Dan.
Well, to answer the question, excuse me, when should we stand up to Putin? It's now. But as we've seen, Donald Trump is not prepared to do that. And Donald Trump has basically been found out today. When Donald Trump thought or claimed to think that Zelensky was an obstacle to peace and an obstacle to a ceasefire, what did he do? He threw him out the Oval Office. He pulled intelligence from Ukraine. He pulled munitions and support, military support from Ukraine. He attempted to he held back-channel negotiations with the opposition parties in Ukraine to try and get Zelensky thrown out of power. What has he done? Now, as we've seen today, that Putin is an obstacle to a ceasefire. He's done nothing. He said, I think it was a week and a half ago, if Putin doesn't do what I say, I'll introduce massive sanctions. But that was in the tweet. That's what he does. And the best scenario we have is that Putin is playing Donald Trump. The worst scenario we have is that Donald Trump and Putin collectively are playing everyone else. But all this talk about, we need Putin to stand up. I mean, we have to wait and see. What are we waiting for? What more does Donald Trump have to do to demonstrate that he is now an ally of Russia and an enemy of Ukraine and those of us that are supposed to be standing alongside Ukraine? When are we going to take a stand?
Okay.
What are we waiting for?
Rachel Muskell.
Well, I think today has shown that there's a new world order at play, and one that we should take incredibly seriously, one that is an affront to the democratic elected governments, such as in Ukraine with Zelensky democratically elected, but also to the rest of the West and no doubt beyond, where there's democratic government, in the way that this discourse has taken place. We've had Trump usurp himself and place himself in this so-called negotiation and come away empty-handed, bar a few measures, but it's also placed Zelensky in a place where he can't rearm, refuel, align with his troops. So in some ways it's like he gave with one hand, we won't damage your energy infrastructure, as if that wasn't already in ruin, but then has come in and put even more pressure on Ukraine. And I think we should be incredibly aware that this is the problem when you have got unaccountable power, which is what I think we're seeing both in Russia and also the United States. And I think this is a time where we have to ask serious questions about where our allegiances, where our alignments are, and how do we build that coalition of democratic representation to stand up to the undemocratic leadership in our world now.
You can't really accuse Trump of being unaccountable or being undemocratic. He won.
I think they're two different things.
In a fair election, and the American Constitution is relatively robust in holding presidents to account.
Well, let's see, because I don't think Donald Trump plays by those Putin's rules. I think he sets his own rules, and I think we saw that in his last administration, indeed undermining the democratically elected Biden when he came into office, and I think we'll see that throughout this administration. We need to think about where those players are, where is the power held, whether that's in Russia, the United States, or indeed in China, and we need to think, where does the future democratic representation come from? And I think we need to hold ourselves tighter to that. The EU would be a classic example of the countries across Europe, I should say, broader than the EU, to align with that and think about what our future world order will be.
You're the first Labour MP to come on this programme since Trump was elected to say anything critical at all.
Well, there we go.
Right, follow-up question from Simon. It says, what did Putin apologies see that normal people can't, Dan Hodges?
What did Putin I mean...
Is that an awful lot of them about?
Yeah, I mean, but, you know, there are an awful lot, again, there are an awful lot of them about, but most of them pop up on social media.
They're the Russian bots, aren't they?
Exactly. And a lot of them are generated from Russia. I mean, I do not, but I think the problem is, we obviously have a problem in this country with, we've talked about the problem with Putin, Russian propaganda, but we've actually got a bigger problem in this country, in my view, with Trump propaganda. And we've got a situation in this country now where we have a significant number of people across the political spectrum who simply are either buying the Trump MAGA propaganda or are just refusing to stand up to the new Trump narrative. And, you know, I've got a lot of, you know, and I've said it, I've got a lot of respect for what Keir Starmer, for example, has tried to do in this situation. But Keir Starmer's foreign policy is suffering from, in my view, a fundamental misconception, which is Keir Starmer is trying to pretend that nothing has changed. That Donald Trump, at the end of the day, is essentially believes the special relationship is intact, that America still stands behind the West, and that America still is essentially a supporter of Ukraine and an opponent of Putin. And it is quite clear that that is no longer the case. What you were saying was absolutely right. The fundamentals of everything that we've rested on for the last, basically in this country since 1945, the great Atlantic Alliance and the United States underpinning NATO and independing our security, that is gone. That is over. And in fairness to the Trump administration, they're being completely honest about it. You know, we had Hesketh came over, the American Defense Secretary, saying, you guys are not our priority anymore. And we're still wandering around pretending that this new reality hasn't happened, and we've got to acknowledge it now.
Edward, what do Putin apologists see that normal people can't?
It's tough. I mean, I want to go back on what you were saying there, Dan, about the issue with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. What else can he do? I mean, the thing is, trying to call it out and to say, listen, I don't like your agenda, don't like what you're doing. It's something that's going to create.
Well, fair enough, but what about the question about Putin apologists? Why is it that so many people in this country, and we get calling into this programme, it's not just bots on social media, there's actual people who phone into this programme defending Putin and criticising the West. I've never been able to fathom that out. People who seem to loathe their own country.
It's one of those questions which, when I have conversations with friends, they always talk about the Zelensky conversation, they talk about funding, they talk about whether this, some of my friends have even said, you know, whether this whole war is justified. And the thing is, where do those people get the information from? And, you know, how can they actually respond for what he's done? I think it's down to an ideology where, you know, people think what he's actually doing, it works for Russian people. And that's when you get into this conversation and it takes you down the rabbit hole and you can never get a definitive answer.
Well, I think we see that just believes it's got the power to walk on anybody's land and to take that, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Macedonia, he can see that pathway to say, I can take that if I choose. So that is why Zelensky, why we've stood by Zelensky, is to stand up to the ban, to ensure that we are putting the pressure back on Russia to say, actually, there are boundaries on which you cannot cross. And in some ways, Ukraine has been the little man against Goliath over the last 3 years and done incredibly well in standing for those values. But as we move forward from this point, because we can't say today didn't happen, what we need to recognise is where those powers are operating across our world. Whether it's China coming into Africa, whether it is the United States now controlling what's happening across North America. We've seen the relationship with Canada already break down. We have got to recognise the reality of where we are at the moment and decide how we rebuild a democratic world order and to put those values on a global platform. And that's the work that I believe Keir Starmer has, David Lammy has, and others, to rebuild the institutions of power globally.
You talk about Africa, China and Africa. That's something that is not often discussed, because I think the case there is China influencing on certain African countries saying, listen, we can do this for you in terms of infrastructure, transportation and everything. But in actual fact, the deal is, if we come off the infrastructure, we help you guys, we want something from it. And to a certain degree, that's kind of meddling in politics or getting involved in
That's a question. I think trying to put this together, for me, it fits into perspectives. So what is Donald Trump's perspective? In my eyes, he seemed to be very clear that he wants to make America great again, that he doesn't want any wars, that Europe should pull its weight, and he's looking towards China as a potential problem. So that's his perspective. Putin's perspective, and to answer your question about the apologists, I guess the thought process they would have is that they see NATO expansion coming across. The fact that we're able to say this, people are going to war on this very topic, so there's a belief that we need to try and understand why people would apologise for that. So it's not something I don't think we can just dismiss it and simply say, well, they got it wrong, because they feel that there's an answer there. But the way I see us resolving this, America are the world power, whether we like it or not. So we have to try and make sure we align what is in our best interest, in Europe and Ukraine's best interest, along with America, and use them to the best of our ability. We're certainly not going to realign to Russia, regardless of what the apologists say.
Can I just quickly say? Just very quickly. That's a classic example. To answer the question, why is Putin's propaganda working? We've been having this conversation. You did lots of programs on this before Donald Trump's election. The line from the Tory MP was very clear. Putin's the aggressor, Putin's the enemy we have to defeat. What has happened since Trump's election? We've had this, with the greatest respect, rubbish. From on the one hand, on the other hand,
I was asking
you asked about why people accept Putin's propaganda, and you answered by giving an answer about Donald Trump's authorities.
No, I give a perspective on both sides.
No, you started just about Donald Trump, and this is the point. This is what's changed. We now have, whereas before it was just we had the Putin apologists, we now have the Trump apologists and people on the right who think they should align themselves with Trump, peddling Putin's propaganda, and that is the fundamental thing that's changed.
Okay, well, the final word on this goes to Amma, who says Ian Down is the John Bolton equivalent to the UK. No, that's something I never thought I'd be called, but there we are, 21 minutes past 8.
LBC.
It's the most wonderful time.
Are you a smart booker or a silly booker? Smart bookers get access to a 3-year pub lounge by booking a 5-star holiday with On the Beach. Silly bookers, well, enjoy those queues at the bar. Stop booking around and visit onthebeach.co.uk.
Conditions apply. Supplement. Stay outbound from selected airports from the 6 people and unprotected.
On the beach.
Yeah, I'm one of their biggest fans. The vinyl. First saw them at a tiny little place in Camden. Then as festival headliners a few years back. Now that was special. So there's no chance I've missed their world tour.
and host of the podcast Across the Pond. Ulf is in Hamburg. Hello, Ulf.
Good evening. Germany just chucked its constitutional debt rate out of the window, at least as far as defense is concerned, so we can spend more money for those worthy purposes. The United Kingdom still sticks to its fiscal rules, which are not even constitutional. You have led the way many ways recently. Should you put more money where your mouth is?
So what is Germany increasing its defence spending to?
That remains to be seen, but we can go into debt. It will be hundreds of billions of euros in the next years.
Okay, well, just a bit of background to this. The lower house of Germany's parliament today approved new rules which will make defence and security-related spending exempt from Germany's strict economic rules on national debt, allowing €500 billion fund for defence and infrastructure to be set up. The upper house of the German parliament will also need to approve this measure later this week. Edward, let's start with you on this. I mean, obviously the British government has announced increases in defence spending, but probably it seems not on the scale of what the Germans are about to do. They've ripped up 70 years of their defence and foreign policy to do this. Should we be more radical?
No. We've got a lot of problems that we need to deal with here. Obviously, defence is an issue, but I mean, I know we're going to probably come to this at some point before 9 o'clock, talking about the welfare reforms and the cuts. I don't think we should go in the same direction as Germany. I think that would be catastrophic.
When you look at the world situation, though, we are in a situation now that is so different from even 2 or 3 years ago. Surely defence spending has to take priority over everything else.
Yeah, that's being told.
You don't spend enough to defend your own country, you might not have a country to defend.
We're being told that we've got to cut back, and there's people, pensioners, who are not being able to put their heating on, and today there's people, disabled people, who are fearing being forthcoming cuts which are going to be implemented in a couple of years. Surely.
Abolish the defence budget.
No, I didn't say that. I'm saying that we should.
What's the logic of your...
No, not at all. I'm saying that it's about compensating, but not going down what Alfie said about what Germany did. That's totally that worked.
My view, my personal view, is absolutely right. I think we do need to massively increase our defence expenditure, given the reality of the situation, which is America, as I say, is not turning its back on Europe, and we do have this existential threat from Putin. I mean, I think the government's position, I think an increase to 2.5% is inadequate. I think it's going to need to be significantly more than that. I'll be completely honest. I do agree with what we just heard. I don't see how there will be a public consensus for that level of increased defence expenditure, whilst we have a government that is simultaneously saying we have to cut support for the most vulnerable people in our society. And I think, as I said, I think we're going to come on to the welfare issue in a moment. But I do think, I've been speaking to people in government who have said they think Keir Starmer has got like a sort of political money in the bank because of his stance on Ukraine, which means that he can now spend money pushing through unpopular policies in relation to things like welfare. I think the opposite with the German population. I completely disagree with you. I completely disagree with you. Let's see which of us is right, but I think they might agree on popular. And I think what is going to happen is, I think Keir Starmer's policies in relation to welfare, things such as you said, as you touched on, rent fuel allowance in relation to pensioners, I think people are going to start turning around and say, hang on a second, if we can afford, why can we afford drones to Ukraine if we can't support disabled people in this country? And I've spoken to Labour MPs who are already starting to say that we're starting to hit that news.
Well, let's talk to the ringleader of the rebellion on these sorts of things, Rachel Maskell.
I mean, this is...
Let's stick to the subject of defence spending.
This is an economic question, and you've got to think about, again, the changing world order. So, do we put the money into defence, and if so, where is that actually going to show payment to bring a more stable world and address some very immediate concerns. But investing in diplomacy seems to be more imminent, that we need to put the focus there than we do on some of the defence, and particularly as we don't know what that extra 0.5% is going to buy. So I think we need to think of it in that terms. But this is about an economic choice, and you can either trade off, which is what we see the government doing at the moment. It's like we're going to pull back on domestic spend and international development and invest in defence, or you enlarge the size of the pot. And that's obviously what we've seen as well happening in Germany. So they're saying this sits outside the fiscal rules. The EU is reviewing its fiscal rules.
But we're not.
And we're not. And the thing is, the world is very different from it was in July. And we need to recognise economic shocks from decisions that Trump is making on trade and a different world order. So I think it is time that we look at those fiscal rules, look at the redistribution of wealth as well. So we heard today a question about the wealth tax. How are we ensuring that we are properly calling that to account and investing in our country? Because it certainly shouldn't be the poorest people in our country which are paying for this new change that we're seeing.
Yeah, so Keir Starmer, when he announced, was it last week, about the defence, certainly saying the situation has changed now fundamentally and security has to come first. Yet you look at some of the policies that are enacted, what he's doing to food security, what he's doing to energy security in terms of North Sea oil, these kind of things. I see an opportunity for him and Rachel Reeves actually with an emergency budget next week. They could actually undo some of the issues that they're putting forward, the tax raises, their plan, because the economy has shrunk, so we don't even have as much money as we wanted to in the first place. Undoing some of that might really well help allow us to grow the economy rather than tax the economy, which may well make a difference to that pledge to get 2.5% and then on to 3% from that point of view. So I think there is a real opportunity for them to undo that budget that is due in from the 1st of April.
But do you think, all this talk about 2.5, 3%, a lot of people think that this is for the birth, that within a few years we'll be talking about 5%. Are you one of those people?
Well, I think we're going to need to get there, and it's back to the point we were making before. Things have changed, so the analysis has to change. I don't think that I take it. You probably didn't say this about Biden, but Trump has changed whether you like it or not. You have to take a new analysis, and that's what's happening with Europe. Everyone is reacting, but as to what level? Because at the end of the day, if we're not going to who's going to pay for it? Who's going to put their money where their mouth is and stand up to Mr. Putin? And that's what we want to hear. And so I think you're right. The trajectory is the way it stands. Could well be that we're going to have to be pushing up above 3%.
Governments have to choose what they're spending money.
Absolutely.
And you've heard what Dan and Edward have said about the choice between welfare, NHS and defence. But you're a medical professional. Obviously you've got a commitment to spending more money on health, but these choices have got to be made, haven't they?
Oh, indeed, and this is the difficulty. So, the Labour Party need to own those choices. They told us 14 years from the sides telling us how we've got things wrong, and there are difficult decisions all along. Remember when we did cut the FCD budget, and Keir Starmer reached across the dispatch box and pointed, every living Prime Minister for the last 20 years agrees that it's the wrong thing to do, but on the one sat over there. Of course, fast forward 3 years, Keir Starmer's done exactly the same thing, because there are tough choices to be made to make sure what are our priorities, and freedom in Europe is up there at the top on his list.
Well, thank you very much for your question. We'll move on to different subjects in just a few moments' time. We're listening to LBC. It's
Village is the clever choice every day, with up to 40% off the original retail price, and members unlock even more. Until the 30th of March, receive an extra 20% off in select boutiques, only for members. Bicester Village, in the heart of the Oxfordshire countryside. T's and C's apply. Visit bistervillage.com to find out more.
The advert looked genuine. A post from a household name, experts in money, a hot opportunity. They asked for a small amount, promised a great return, took all I had, and then disappeared. Investment scammers are highly sophisticated, and every month, CEL talk to thousands of people like you who've fallen victim. Our experts can help recover your money, so head to celsolicitors.co.uk today.
Here comes Steve, with the satisfied smile of a man who's checked me out at midday after a great night's sleep and a delicious unlimited brekkie. See an untamable bedhead hair, and if you look really close, you can see that properly well-rested glow. Which can only be one thing. Last night he slept at Premier Inn. Get better sleep for your money. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Breakfast subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Angela Ribbon, what are you doing?
I've come to tell you about using energy flexibly.
Flexibly?
Yes, smart meter owners could get rewarded for moving their energy use, like doing the laundry at off-peak times.
So I don't need to do the splits?
No one would. Nobody wants to see that.
Get rewarded for using energy flexibly, only with a smart meter. Search Get a Smart Meter today.
Eligibility and availability vary. Consumer action required. Reward schemes and tariffs available to selected customers from selected suppliers.
New customers get 12 months for the price of 11 at petsinnapickle.co.uk. Use code 12 for 11. T's and C's apply.
Cross question with Ian Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:35. Let me reintroduce my panel. Rachel Askell, Labour MP for York Central, Dr. Luke Evans, Conservative Shadow Health Minister and MP for Hinckley and Bosworth, and former GP. Dan Hodges is a columnist for the Mail on Sunday, and Edward Uddy is a broadcaster and the host of the podcast Across the Pond, which is new.
It's new, yeah, we've got 2 episodes in. We've got the third one next week, which is good. So, hosted with a good friend of mine, T Storm, who's a broadcaster in the States. We met many years ago. He used to work for a radio station in the States called Hot 97. And he approached me 5 years ago and he said, look, we should do a podcast called Across the Pond. At the time, I had loads going on. Then he reached out to me and I said, you know what? I think this is the time.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I would love to work on a radio station called Hot 97.
And he made the jingles for them as well. And he's made the jingles for the podcast as well. He is like the audio sonic king.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, we need some new jingles from that, I think. We've only just started. Right, Chris is in Stubbington. Chris, what's your question, please? Good evening. Are you concerned or insured, Chris? Right, let's Rachel Maskell, let's come to you first on this. You've expressed concerns over a number of health and welfare issues over the course of the first few months of the government. What was your reaction when you heard what this cabinet announced today?
Well, I think obviously it was trailed very heavily in advance, and my red line is very much about how do we ensure people maintain their independence, psychologically safe, i.e. their mental health is not deteriorated as a result of the change, that people are kept from poverty and are able to maintain their dignity. And my concern is that this £5 billion, if you're taking that out of the budget, that means it comes from individuals' back pockets. That means people are going to get less, and that's where my big concern is. We know that people that will be new signing on will get £2,600 less from the health element of universal credit. Didn't hear that in advance of today, but also we are going to be seeing the eligibility criteria in which, in order to get that support, that social security, is going to change. It's going to be a higher level, which means many people that get that support today may not get that in the future. And of course I welcome people moving into work, and all of that support package, all of that's really positive. But we've got to remember there's two groups of people. There's a group of people that can't work and won't be able to, and we've heard assurances that those people will be kept safe. But what about those people in the middle? What happens to them? They may be deemed as being able to work, but without that whole holistic support, psychologically, getting confidence, getting work ready, and quite possibly taking time over that, what happens to them in the interim? That's the group I'm most concerned about.
Forgive me for being cynical. When I listen to the debate earlier on, and I've got friends and some relatives who kind of fall under that wing in terms of getting support, and I've had to intervene by speaking to DWP, trying to fill in forms, and even for me, who's an able person, it's very stressful, because sometimes you do speak to people who don't get it, and somewhat patronising. I'm not saying the whole department are, and I think hearing this, and all I've heard so far for today is it seems the new ethos is get people to work.
It's massive.
Why is that about?
Yeah.
It depends if people are eligible to work and they can do it. But I think it's about investigating someone's predicament or their circumstance. And if someone is dealing with, someone may have psychosis or dealing with schizophrenia, and that's the issue. Sure. If you put them in a workplace and they can't deal with people, then you can't say, we're going to be in the workplace. If you can't do it, then you're not going to get any benefits.
Employers themselves have got a huge responsibility in this as well.
It's about training for employers as well, because some employers don't get it, and it's about having a backward perception of mental health, and saying, well, in actual fact, we don't want to employ that person.
You get discrimination,
exactly.
You get people put on capability procedures, and even bullied out of work. So what we need to ensure is that we've got that infrastructure in place, which clearly isn't in place today, and that's why so many people are out of work. We've also got to understand so many of those people on NHS waiting lists at the moment, they've got long COVID. We didn't have that in 2019, so that context has changed as well. There's so many elements to understand.
How are they going to be supported for this?
They're asking that question at the moment because many feel very much forgotten at the moment, and they're struggling day by day. Even just getting out and sitting in a chair can be a massive effort for those people. And then we've got this whole generation of young people who have come up, they haven't got the mental health resilience, and going into a workplace incredibly stressful, they're experiencing acute anxiety, perhaps to a level that we don't understand, but also that means that they haven't got the confidence to be able to navigate themselves in the workplace. So a lot of work needs to be put in place. Now, I don't think those people should be denied the opportunity to work, but we've got to work with people. It's got to be about co-production, and therefore the state, together with employers, together with the disabled person, working together. The thing that I feel saddest about is that disabled people are not part of this conversation. It's being done to them as opposed to them leading the way. And I think we've got to, I've read the Green Paper today, and it said this element is for consultation, this element isn't for consultation. I think the whole thing should be for consultation. So disabled people are put at the heart of policies which impact on them.
Well, to go back to your point, Chris, please don't suffer in silence today. Go and speak to your DWP, speak to your MP in the first place to get some ideas of what can be done to help support you in your individual situation, number one. I guess one of the driving forces of maybe of getting into politics is when I saw this, because it boils down to me for how do we effectively legislate for attitude, because I've seen so many people in my GP clinic who want to work, but their disability, the world doesn't allow them to support them to do that, and that's an absolutely crying shame from them. But I have seen the flip side with people who are signed off sick, they're not able to, for whatever reason, they're not having any treatment, they're not taking any medication, and they're fulfilling what we call the sick role on the medical side. And that's not compassionate either, leaving people effectively in that state, and that's not fair to the taxpayers. So the question marks around this, and this was what was being grappled at the end of the last Parliament, was how do you design a system that is fair, that allows people to get back to work, and supports those who really need the work, but actually calls out the people who should really be working but are just choosing not to. And that's the balance, and that is a reality that you see. So both sides of the political spectrums like to play at one side or the other. Nasty person for making cuts, or far too soft. There's a cross between the two, and there's a plethora that you see. The young people business side of things, I really think it's really important, because we often talk a lot, it's very trendy in the last 5 years to talk about mental health, but there's two different things: mental well-being and mental health. Everyone has mental well-being problems. Look at the lockdown, everyone's struggling with their relationships, getting out for work. Not everyone has a mental health problem, which is very different and needs a very different set of support. And if you want me to give you an example, it's absolutely normal to be petrified coming to see you, Ian, for the first time on this show and have
You're hiding it well.
a sweaty reaction to it. But it's not normal for me to then go out and when I just go to the cafe to have lunch, to have that same reaction. And there's a big difference in that. And that's where we need to get the system right to help people guided back through. And in answer to Chris's question, should you work? Part of the biggest problem we've heard today is they've announced it, but we don't have any details. We don't know the costs. We don't know the criteria. There's been no impact assessment done. I'm really worried because this has all the hallmarks of the wins fuel payments again. It wasn't in a Labour manifesto. There's an announcement made, a vote done, then we find the impact assessment afterwards. And that's a really scary place to be if that's the way the policy is going to be done.
Dan Hodges, you've been pretty punchy on the subject on Twitter today.
Yeah, because I think the debate is being framed in completely the wrong way by politicians of both the main parties. I keep hearing how the bottom line on this debate is that we cannot continue to fund the welfare budget the way we are. I don't think that's the bottom line, and I particularly don't think that's the bottom line for the British people. I think the starting point for this is, are we prepared to tolerate a society where people who are disabled and as a result of that cannot work are going to be consigned to a situation where they either freeze to death in their home, starve to death in their homes, or live effectively in their own feces in their homes. Now, I think everybody across this panel would say that's not an acceptable position. So that has to be the bottom line. The bottom line is, do we provide the support for the people who need the support? Once we've guaranteed that support, then we can build up from there and look at areas of the system where there may be some excess. Second point for me, and this is another fundamental point, is we all understand the backdrop to this debate, which is the economic and fiscal pressures, crisis that the government is facing. Why is it that once again, and we've been doing this for years, when it comes to a point of economic and fiscal crisis...
Dan, stop talking this
economic and fiscal...
You're as bad, Luke.
Economic and fiscal crisis. The starting point for the debate is, how can we get the most vulnerable people in our society to make greater sacrifices? At the same time, and with the great respect to the politicians we have, this is the formal position of both the main parties. We cannot have a discussion about asking people on the highest income in society to see what they can contribute. So both of the main parties are currently telling us we can't have a discussion about maybe, for example, should we increase the top rate of tax? That is a